Okay, this is the video for the basic shell shape for the Eddy Wrap shawl. I have finished my beginning of the row shell, which is another video. You can go take a look for that. That's the right edge shell. And I have come to my first stitch marker, so I'm going to take that off. Because you have followed the instructions and you've placed your stitch markers every 14 stitches in the row. And that will help you know where you are in relationship to the end of the shell. So this is 14 stitches, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. And I'm going to join my new yarn. And I'm going to knit, as the instructions say, 8 stitches. 1, 2, 3. Now, the logic of those 8 stitches is that this is a 14 unit shell. So I am knitting half of the stitches in the shell plus 1. So that creates a centered stitch, which is here. In this previous shell here, it's that stitch there that's all by itself at the bottom, at the center of the bottom of the shell. And that is that shell there, that is our stitch there, that is number 7, and that is number 8. So I'm going to turn, and then that shell will remain centered because I'm going to slip that first stitch purlwise, and then I'm going to purl 2. I'm going to turn back to the right side. I'm going to slip that first stitch, and I'm going to knit 3, which is the number of the stitches that I've knit already plus 1. Turn to the wrong side. And give some little snugging up here. Slip, and I'm going to purl the stitches I purled before plus 1. I'm going to turn back to the right side. I'm going to slip that first stitch, and I'm going to knit the stitches that I knit before, or that I have here before on my new yarn, plus 1. Now, for those of you who are familiar with short row techniques, you will recognize this as a wrapless short row. I am not wrapping the stitch and knitting the wrap together with stitches. The stitch itself is the anchor for the turn. And in experimenting with this technique, I discovered, or I decided that I really liked the lack of bulk and the lack of extra stitches and busyness at the edge of the shells with the wrapless technique. So that is why I don't wrap and turn for this particular pattern. If I knit this first stitch, for example, in the turning, then I would have this sort of extra stitch here, and it would create more of a hole than I like when I come back. See, there's a lot more space in there. So I just decided that it was a wrapless short row for me. So I slip, I knit, and again, I said this in another video, but don't worry too much about whether you knit this leg or you knit as if to purl, you knit through the back loop. This stitch doesn't really have an orientation yet, so you don't really need to worry about which leg you find yourself knitting. Now it has an orientation because you've given it a direction by choosing the way that it sits, but in the fabric. But that first time you work that stitch, I would not worry about it. And that it goes for the same on the purl side. I tend to purl through the front leg here without really thinking about it. Depending on the way you knit, you can go your own way on this one. I'm not going to sit over you or tisk about it. Now, the other thing that is going on here is I'm always going to have an even number of stitches that I've worked, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I've got 2 stitches left. The math on this is all working towards using 14 stitches altogether. So you're going to always have an even number of stitches that you are working on in any row. The moment you find yourself, I've got 11 here, I was supposed to have 12, it means you've made a mistake, so you need to go back. I recommend doing your counting the first few of these that you are creating, so that you can get an orientation. You can understand, make as little progress past the mistake as possible. I've got 2 more rows here. So there's my right side row here, slipping, knitting. I'm not really counting on the right side row, because I know that when I get to that last stitch I worked, that's the last stitch, and then I work 1 more. Turn again. This is my last wrong side row, because I have 1 last stitch over here on the right hand side to work. I'm going to get a little bit of a snug. These ends of rows. Now, you can do something here, like if you wanted to tie these together or whatever. I just leave them undetermined. I've gotten very sort of casual about this, having knit a lot of these, but you can see that there's quite a bit of a gap here. This will get closed up when you come to that place in your next row of shells, and then you can weave your ends in, or tie them in a surgeon's knot and then weave them in if you like. Surgeon's knots help the yarn stay tied to itself. And there is my last stitch. So I should have 14 stitches here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. And indeed I do. Take off my stitch marker, because I know that I've finished. Frightening, isn't it? And now I'm ready to go and knit my next 14 stitch shell. This is for the Eddy Wrap on Mason Dixon Knitting. If you have questions, check it out there. There's a thread called the Eddy Wrap in the forums, the lounge, I guess it's called, at masondixonknitting.com. And I can answer questions there anytime you leave the one for me. Thank you very much.